Wake up! America is being invaded! The Japanese are coming, and not just the Japanese. Invasion Amerika, spelt with lots of K's instead of C's, is like Festung Europa. It's a law book, it's an art book, it has scenarios that follow the story. There are no new unit rules. Those will come out in an updated PDF. The PDFs for all of the factions for Konflikt 47 are free on the Warlord Games website. So any new platoon formations, that will come out there. Any new characters, their rules will come out there. So if you're just looking for rules to use units, that comes out for free. First, I'm going to tell you about the lore that's in this book. All of the lore, but in a general overview sense. So skip to the timestamp about scenarios if you want to know more about the missions in the book and don't want lore spoilers. However, the scenarios are all based around things that happen in the book. They're all story missions that match the lore. Okay. Invasion Amerika focuses on Japan and the United States. It gives us confirmation about what I already suspected about the lore, that the nuclear bomb captured by Japan has been deliberately detonated at Iwo Jima in June 1944. This creates the third rift, a rift that none of the other factions know about. This gives the Japanese their own rift tech with slightly different variations compared to the other factions, whereas before they were using the basics that were sent by the Axis. The Japanese have their own version of the Totem Core and the Mark I level power armor, the battle frames. But now that they have their own rift, there is a division between Japan and the German New Republic, like between the British Commonwealth and the United States. They're in the war together, but jealously guarding their secrets. I guess you could say there's a rift between them? Now, the big question for alternate history is how come Japan has avoided defeat at the hands of the US and the Allies? Rift tech has allowed them to make much greater gains into China, and that has freed up a lot of manpower. The Burma campaign was still lost, but to British automatons as well as the Chindits. And the way the Japanese has been able to hold the United States back is with super stealth phasing submarines and some freak weather wrecking and damaging the US fleets. But that part of the lore we already knew from the core rules of Konflikt 47. US bombing has been slowed by the advancement of jet technology from the Japanese. They're using Rift tech to make a super fighter interceptor. So with Japanese air and sea power, the island hopping is reversed. Dug-in Americans are now waiting for supplies that will never come because their convoys are being sunk by submarines, while the Japanese attack to drive them out. Furthermore, until recently, in 1947, the US was focusing on their religious crusade to end the evil of the Axis in Europe, and to do so before the Soviets. Europe was the focus, not Japan, which was considered a less important regional power. So most Rift weapons the United States had, like the Fireflies and the Tesla weapons, were sent to fight in Europe. The United States in the Pacific was their historical self until about 1945. So you could play a bolt-action United States army against a Konflikt 47 Japanese army, and I have a video with advice on how to play that out. To also help the Japanese in this world, some battles before the start of the Rift War have been rewritten. So midway, rather than 4 Japanese carriers being lost to 1 United States carrier, it was 1 carrier lost by the Japanese and 2 by the United States. So a lot has been done to keep the Japanese from their historical slow defeat. The main focus of the book is Operation Shokogo, Operation Swift Victory. You may have seen this poster shared by Warlord Games. The Japanese need to set up a transmitter, and then they can travel long distances and ghost walk to the United States. So 36 Ghost Warriors are dropped off by submarine in Mexico, and they are going to walk to Area 51. They're mentioned as 3 squads, so unit size of Ghost Warriors may change soon from 5 to 10 to 5 to 12 models, possibly. Fighting dehydration crossing the desert and raiding local farms and towns to get supplies, the survivors plant a beacon in Shinobi space just outside of Area 51. On Iwo Jima, the waiting troops go through its giant jump portal, 2,500 troops and 80 new Onryo walkers. That many get through the gate to attack Area 51, then the gate on Iwo Jima breaks, making this a one-way trip, and dooming the mission. The Japanese that are attacking don't know that the gate is broken. The Japanese take the perimeter of Area 51 and hold it waiting for their scientists to come through and take samples and analyze the Area 51 rift. Perhaps they can hold it much longer and deny the Americans their rift energy. But of course, reinforcements and scientists are not coming. Slammer Samuels comes instead from Los Alamos itself with a ragtag force. The Japanese hold him off until, from within Area 51, the scientists released creatures captured by Roberta Wells in Europe. Zombies and werewolves, which are the real template for research that created the Paragon program in the United States. Gasp! These superhuman Captain America types have had their DNA altered based on werewolf shenanigans. Uh-oh, that's evil and bad and wrong, as all werewolf-related things are. Slammer Samuels faces Kimura, the Red Samurai, and he's forced back before having to send troops back to Los Alamos because there's been a civilian uprising there? Who could have caused that? This is where the Soviets fight the United States. They haven't gotten along since the United States declared them a godless enemy and valid to crusade against. Kinda puts a damper on relations. US fifth columnist traitors was teased in the Festung Europa book, and they have been tasked by Stalin to help the Japanese to destroy the Area 51 rift. As the Japanese force is not getting reinforcements, destroying the rift would be better than nothing, even if the original plan was to send samples for study. So the 5th columnists were tasked with distracting United States forces and getting whatever intelligence they could back to the Soviets. The group was able to get into Los Alamos as the majority of the soldiers left with Slammer Samuels, but they also took most of the weapons that the turncoats were planning to use to secure the base. So the 5th columnists were defeated relatively quickly. And the US troops there are mentioned to be armed with the M1X2 Thompsons that the Fireflies use. It would be nice to see a redone basic US infantry, but with more rift tech. But I don't think such models are coming soon. There is no scenario to play this part of the book, but you could use the partisan rules from Bold Action. Currently they're a free PDF on the Warlord Games website. To end the fight at Area 51, the United States Special Service Force of less than normal looking US Paragons infiltrated the base and defeated Kimura, fighting close to the rift itself and knocking out Kimura where his ghost tech wouldn't work because the type of rift energy is unique to each rift. You can't recharge using different rift tech. Samuels breaks in at the same time and finds out that there were many alternate versions of the Paragons. Like, these metal Axis fellows, they're not too far off what the Paragons could end up looking like if they go a bit more weird. And there's a captain with a mutated arm, Captain Leo Benashi. Possible new model to come? Maybe just rules, but maybe. Samuels had not been told about these less normal Paragons, or that there's a 10% success rate for the Paragon program. The Paragons are at risk of developing mutations, which is why Samuels was always closely supervised and generally kept from the front lines. If he mutated, then that put the future of the entire program into doubt because he is the Paragon of the Paragons, the first successful one. So Kimura is canonically currently captured. You may not want to have your own character who hasn't done much in the lore and is now a prisoner. Maybe that will change in the future, and if the rules are cool, I don't think many people will mind. So Operation Shokogo is a failure. Once the Japanese were not getting reinforcements, once there were no scientists coming to take samples and materials back to Japan, it was over. The units within Area 51 didn't realize they were not getting more help and followed their existing orders to take and hold the base. They did not think to destroy the rift to deny it to the United States, and at the same time also stop the Commonwealth getting rift energy as they get it through the Lend-Lease program. They just held the base. Independent on-the-spot thinking to act in defiance of orders is not what the Japanese soldiers of this time were known for, of course. That is the end of the operation, but that is not the end of the story within the book. I was hoping for a Canada arc, like Invasion of America, the entire northern continent. I wanted some Commonwealth involvement. I've done a video about how you can use the Bolt Action Commonwealth book in Konflikt 47, various different ways, whether approved by Warlord Games or not, so you can use Canadian rules in Konflikt 47. Canada does get a mention because Canada protests when United States troops are moving through their territory without permission. But why would the US be moving through Canada? Because the Soviets. Maybe you heard from me or someone else, or a Warlord Games promotion about the book mentioning Soviets. If you thought the fifth columnist were the end of it, you were wrong. The Rift War is changing the planet. Gravity is strange at Dresden, there are more earthquakes around the Pacific, especially around Iwo Jima, and there's climate change, not necessarily hotter weather, but more extreme weather. The Bering Strait has frozen in February 1947, and the Soviets wish to test the Americans by striking into Alaska. This is Operation Sirius. If it went well, it could be a beachhead of sorts before a deeper strike into the US. If their Operation Pluto from Festung Europa failed to take Dresden, they may be able to take Los Alamos, and either way, have a rift of their own. The Soviets have a specialist unit for the cold, the Moroz Ghul. In March 1947, they take Mark's Army airfield, but they're quickly dislodged by a US counterattack, the one that moved through Canada without permission. It's a very small, basically, addendum, just so there's another thing to fight. And although this is Invasion America, you get a lot of lore about other battles you may wish to fight. The Commonwealth are fighting in New Guinea to find and destroy the Japanese factories that produce Shibutu, the fast zombies. They're mostly made from enemy dead, while the Axis Totem Corps are mostly their own. The Japanese finding a way to overcome the residual loyalties of the dead men before von Zogling. There are Paragons fighting ghost soldiers in the Philippines. The United States attacks Iwo Jima, the source of Japanese rift tech, but it's been even more heavily fortified than it was historically. The US doesn't realize this, and they want it as a key island to get towards the Japanese mainland. The US don't get much further than the southeast quarter of the island. The Japanese super stealth submarines sink resupply boats, because it's hard to fight a submarine that phases in and out of reality. What is happening with China? It's a big nation of the Second World War, but it's missing rules from Konflikt 47 and Bolt Action 3rd edition. Chiang Kai-shek is on poor terms with the United States and trying to hold ground, not making strikes against the Japanese or the Communists. The Communists have some rift tech, but the Nationalists have not been given rift tech as far as we know. The Russians support the Chinese Communists, but the Nationalists are not well supported by the Commonwealth or the United States. There are no Bolt Action or Konflikt 47 rules for China, but modified Soviet or Japanese rules could work. I very much encourage you to make your own rules for this game. So that is the main events of the book. The result of it, the United States no longer has a Europe first policy. They underestimated Japan again, first with Pearl Harbor, now with this strike into America. So they're dedicating most of their forces to fight Japan now. They will strike at Iwo Jima again. Slammer Samuels has learned that the Paragons are not necessarily the people he fights with. There are a lot of weird, more mutated Paragons. And there are many more potential secrets held by Area 51, with a reference to the Raiders of the Lost Ark. Nothing about alien spacecrafts. I thought they might have had some kind of Roswell incident tied in, but nope. I haven't found anything of the sort. Roberta Wells, back in Europe, takes off alone. Maybe to meet up with Bertie and give him a kiss. Whatever you want to imagine. The next big book, which is coming towards the end of the year, could be back in Europe with a look at how the Commonwealth is making up the shortage in manpower in Europe. I'm sure nothing bad will happen. And you could have France as a manpower source. They're going to be getting a bolt action book. If the United States is heavily abandoning its European obligations, the Commonwealth takes in France. They already have allied Italian Konflikt 47 units, but the United States also has Italian Fireflies. They're in the United States Army list. One thing you've got to know about Konflikt 47 is all major attempts to change the status quo will be defeated. Soviet Operation Pluto, the Roman god of death, is stopped by the zombies. The Japanese swift strike fails. The American attack on Iwo Jima and Operation Touchdown in Europe fails. So the war will continue. The amount of rift energy from each rift is lowering after all these disasters around the 3 rifts, and an independent, safe source of energy is being sought. It's July 1947 in the timeline, so there's another half year of lore minimum to tell. Another book is coming before the end of the year. I expect the focus will be more on the Commonwealth and the Soviets. the two factions that do not have their own rift, but have been searching for ways to harness rift tech without an open rift. So let's talk about the scenarios. There's a small battle, 3 big battles of like 2,000 points, and a final normal size battle. I don't show off all the scenarios and go through them page by page and rule by rule. I think there should be a reason for you to buy the book from Warlord Games, aside from the lore and the art. But the first mission is a great one for new players, and it's sure to be beloved by anyone who wants to roleplay as an American who keeps a gun by the bed in case the Japanese attack. It's 300 points, it's played on a 4x4 board. You don't really use the side opposite the road, so a 4x3 table would work just fine. This represents the 36 Japanese Ghost Warriors resupplying a United States town and fighting the US civilians. The Japanese have to take supplies without raising the alarm. If they fail and the alarm is raised, they have to fight the whole town and win with no witnesses and get the supplies. It's fun. Every model is its own unit in the Japanese army, but the Japanese can't use rift abilities like Spirit Dance, but can use their rift dice to phase through the building walls and grab supplies. You could play this battle with other forces up to 300 points. Nachtjäger making terror raids, British Grenadiers and Bertie on a daring raid to grab intelligence. I wouldn't play this with any damage value 7+ units, because the impossible damage of rolling a 6 followed by another 6 in combat is the only way the civilians can take one down. I tried it with Ghost Warriors, and I think there is an advantage to the civilians. You can have 3-man bait units in buildings, inexperienced, they're shirkers, they have pistols only, very cheap. They can get killed, and other units on the road within 6 inches of the door can witness it, and if they're still alive at the end of the turn, that will raise the alarm. On the road, they're too far away for the Japanese to kill them before the alarm is raised. And because the Japanese are units of 1, if there's an assault and they die in the assault, even if they kill a civilian or 2, the civilians survived, so they win the combat. The alarm is raised at the end of the turn. If this happens late into the turn, then the Japanese player won't be able to throw more soldiers in to deal with the problem. An idea with things like this is to have the attacking force group up in one area and focus on like the right flank, but the Japanese attackers deploy first, so the civilians walking the streets can be set up in a similar group to oppose them. And if you kill a unit within 6 inches of another unit, that other unit has spotted you and will raise the alarm. But it's a good scenario for learning the basics of the game. Drawing dice from a bag, what hit roll you need, what damage value you need to roll to kill a model, how close assault works, rules like that. You can better understand it in a small environment of this book. The second scenario is when the Japanese main force appear at the edge of Area 51 and the anti-air guns on the base start shooting at them. I love the art of the Japanese stealth battalion attacking. They have the idea of Naruto running to try and stop the enemy. Storm Area 51, they can't stop us all. That was 7 years ago. The Japanese have 2,000 points in their army, but with a limited roster of the Ghost type units, while the United States has 1,500 points, but none of their troops can be veteran, which prevents many rift choices like the Paragons and Fireflies. The Japanese come in 3 waves and are disoriented. They can't move when they arrive, and lose their hard to kill rule. This gives the Americans a better opportunity to take them out. Kimura is the exception, because Kimura is super cool. The Japanese have to capture or destroy 3 turrets, and like in the previous scenario, they can phase through walls by expending their rift dice. It's a cool scenario linked to the kind of unit you're playing. But we had a capture/silence the gun missions in the previous book as Fireflies dropped onto anti-air guns. I would have liked something a bit different. Scenario 3 is a pretty standard breakthrough. The Americans, optionally led by Slammer Samuels, have to get off the opposite board edge and into Area 51. The Japanese Ghost Warriors have to stop them. What makes this far less standard is the Monsters Unleashed rule. You are battling with Axis horrors running around. It's cool to add to any battle. Fighting in a French village? 3 Totenkor or a roaming werewolf appear and have to be dealt with. The mission doesn't seem to have many of these monsters. Only 1 unit unless you draw the monster die and roll surging, which means a unit plus another one is coming later. 3 Totenkor are pretty easily dealt with, so they become a minor distraction at best instead of a big twist on the mission. But you can modify this to suit your desires. Add however many you want to the bag, or add one every second turn. They come from the defender's deployment zone, but that is where the US are moving to, so it will affect both players. Scenario 4 is about defeating Kimura. A last stand for the Japanese, it is what they're known for. These are equal-sized armies, but the Japanese start with exhausted rift dice, and if they're in the rift zone half of their board, must re-roll successful morale tests, like the one you take when you use the Spirit Dance ability. They also lose their hard to kill rule, while the attacker's rift weapons lose their rift abilities when in the zone. Except for the Special Service Force Paragon units led by Captain Leo and his huge arm pointing the way. Scenario 5 is the fight against the Soviets, set the earliest in the timeline. It's 1,000 points of Soviets versus 1,500 points of United States. The Soviets try and take the base and they advance over open ground, but with the mist of the Moroz Ghoul giving the army light cover. The attacker gets 2 victory points for each of their unit that ends the game fully within the defender's deployment zone. The defender gets 1 victory point for each enemy unit destroyed and 1 victory point for each of their own units that end the game within their own deployment zone. A difference of 4 victory points is needed to get a clear victory. This scenario also has winter rules as a storm comes in. Then all non-Moroz Ghoul units get a pin marker at the start of every turn, and to shoot at an enemy, you have to spot them, you roll 2d6, and then there's several modifiers to see whether or not you can see the enemy. So fighting is going to be very close up. You could use bolt action snow rules as an alternative or an addition, but these rules interact with the Moroz Ghoul, so you want to take some Soviet Moroz Ghoul. These scenarios are historic, in quotation marks, refights, but you could modify them as you please. Even though the Axis and Commonwealth don't come up in the book, you could reframe the battles to be between them. It isn't the Japanese Ghost Warriors advancing on Area 51, it's a Commonwealth robot army emerging from a river to attack an Axis fortress from an unexpected angle. They temporarily lose their hard-to-kill rule because the water is affecting the Mark II systems. When they use the rift dice to move through the walls, that is them rushing the stone barrier and breaking through. Anyone can play these missions, and I like these missions more than the ones in Festung Europa. As a narrative storyteller who likes games to have that initial story premise with rules that match and bear out in the game, this is a good book. Now, what else is coming for Konflikt 47? New units, Shadow Warrior Squad, which is a variation of the Ghost Warriors, but like with combat weapons, as far as I can tell. New Ghost Warrior models in plastic. I do like the diving helmet look. It's very cool. There's a Shinobi Walker, the Onryo Assault Walker, a new Slammer Samuels model, the new Japanese character, Kimura, Scourge of the Shadow Realm. There is mention of an M10 Grizzly coming as a potential new US Walker. And we should see rules for a Ghost Platoon Commander. We're definitely getting some rules for the Soviet Svetlana and Nina, which is a Soviet sniper team with an anti-tank rifle. And Nina is a daughter of the motherland who carries the anti-tank rifle. Likewise, one of the scenarios mentions Leo Bianchi. It is spelled Bianchi. Have I been calling him Benashi? One of the scenarios mentions the captain of the Paragons as a unit, so he's gonna have some rules. Same reason we know the sniper team is coming. They may be rules only rather than rules and models. If you're gonna buy any models, buy them through my affiliate link for Warlord Games. That is greatly appreciated. And if you want any other models, like Zulu, a whole range of Zulu models, they look really cool. And there's also prototype Mark II US armor, about which I have opinions. I don't think Mark II armor is needed. I think it's fine as a unique or special Axis thing, but supposedly every faction is gonna get a Mark II armor. The Soviets could have it, they already have 2 types of Mark I armor. One of them could be changed to Mark II. The Commonwealth have Mark II automatons that are defense value 7+. I don't think they need Mark II Galahads. Heavy armor isn't really the vibe for Japan, and the US getting Mark II armor feels like the Americans getting what everyone else has, plus their own things. I would prefer plastic Mark Is for the Americans. With the release of Festung Europa, there were 2 new platoon types, a Firefly platoon and a Totenrot platoon. Don't expect Ghost platoon rules for the Japanese or an SSF Special Paragon platoon for the US. In the one scenario that has the SSF doing special things and infiltrating Area 51, they are marked as saying, yeah, this isn't an assault platoon, you still need to have an assault platoon, whereas the Firefly platoon replaces the need for an assault platoon. It's just a thing for this scenario to say you have the captain and you have paragons, and that is your SSF platoon. And in the missions, there is no mention of a ghost platoon, but there is a mention to say you have to have an assault platoon that has a certain number of ghost units. I don't think they would be saying that if there was a special organized ghost platoon coming. There's potential for one to come later, along with a Japanese rework. They are the weakest of the 5 factions in Konflikt 47, but not by much. But noticeably are the weakest. Like the rule about the ghost squads being destroyed if their morale test is failed, that could be changed to be roll against the damage value of each model if the morale test is failed, so only some models are lost. Like you'd roll 5 dice, and if there's 1 5 and 4 1s, 1 is equal to or higher than the damage value of the unit, so 1 model is killed. Some Japanese players won't use their ability because they risk losing the whole unit, especially if it has some pins lowering the leadership. That's something I would like to see, but I don't think it's going to happen, because seeing some of the scenarios also have the unit be destroyed if they fail their morale test as they're trying to phase through a wall, I doubt this change will come. But the Shiboru Rifle Squad could be specialist infantry rather than regular infantry, like the British Grenadiers. Currently you need to find some way of getting regular infantry into your platoons, which you can do, but then it's fighting against the regular infantry platoon, and the Shiboru rifles are very expensive. They may come down in points, because 6 points per man is a bit steep, even if the weapons are cool. I haven't seen any rules revamped for them yet. If I do, I could make another video explaining the changes. But that would be another time, in another video. My darlings and viewers, have a great day in the Rift War.